Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach, and today we have back with us Joshua Sherrard, who's President and CEO of Strategic Navigators, and we'll be discussing the benefits of building the right business structure for success. Joshua, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here.
I know that's a weighty, lofty goal is talking about the best business structure for success, because in reality, you can check the box and go business structure 101, let me Google it and okay, I'm done. But is it the right one for success? And that means that you must know what success looks like for your business. Where do you want to head? What's that true north so you can navigate there? So talk a little bit about, what to keep in mind when you're starting to think about the right business structure.
And I appreciate that, Mike. When you think about the right business structure for success and you're looking at what is the outcome, what's the end result? The end result is money in your pocket as the entrepreneur, as the business owner. And a lot of people, when they get into starting a business, they may call their local CPA, or they may go on to LegalZoom.com or whatever it is, and they just say, hey, I need to pop up an LLC because that's what I heard at the barbecue the other night. And they'll go in and they'll start up an LLC because that is your basic corporation, or maybe they start as a sole proprietor. And I like to call those the peanut butter and jelly years, where you're just kind of moving from month to month, you're building a base, and that's okay for that period of time, but it's doing nothing for you with regard to taxes. And so what we strongly recommend is to adapt the S corporation structure, which, as I talk with individuals all across the country, it doesn't matter whether you have a manufacturing company or a HVAC company or a dental practice, having the S corporation structure in your suite of companies is a necessary piece of it, because the way the IRS has designed that S corporation is such that it's a pass-through entity, and you want some, if not all, of your income to be handled through that S corporation. And so we strongly recommend the S corporation. Lots of different opportunities out there. We also use a C corporation for different things that we try to maximize, and we're going to be talking about that in future episodes, but we want to maximize all the benefits that come out of a C corporation and not rob you of that just because you have an S corporation. Sometimes clients will come to me and they'll say, hey, I have a building. What do I do with that? And we put that into a separate LLC. Or maybe a couple of dentists come to me and they say, Josh, we're set up as an S corp. What do you recommend? And we will put together a sophisticated structure, but an effective structure of a partnership that then is housed within two S corporations. And so you start to get into some more sophisticated designs, but that's what we specialize in, with the objective of saving money on taxes, but also making you protected from your liability and any issues that way.
Well, it's like what you were laying out there when you get all these letters and numbers, S corp, C corp, LLC, sole prop, all these choices. Well, you need to know why you would consider one over the other. So I guess it gets back down to that structure for success. What does success look like? Where are you headed? Why do you want to, consider making this move or that move? And like the example about the dentist or partners, well, if there's a building involved and you want to ultimately protect the partners or create tax, liability protection, there's all of those things that go into it. And it really, in my opinion, and I'm not the expert, you are, those kinds of things go well beyond what you find on Google, LegalZoom, or wherever, where you could download a form and go, let's fill it out and have it notarized. It really is something where you must make sure you're doing it the right way, not only to do it, right to not get in trouble, but also to maximize opportunity, minimizing taxes and increasing, possibility for cash flow.
100%. I think about a story of a very successful client that I had who he was turning 65 and he was having a big birthday party. And so he went ahead and he said, hey, we're going to throw a big birthday party. They actually had some alcohol there, nothing crazy, but there was one of his employees that had some alcohol and didn't get drunk, but he had a couple drinks and he drove, and he ran a red light on his way home and ended up actually killing someone, which is very tragic. But in the process, the family of the deceased and their lawyers, they did not sue the individual who was driving. They came after the business owner.
Wow.
Who basically threw a party for his birthday. And the reason they did that is because they could find very easily, they could see that this business owner had a lot of money stored up in his company. I'm talking over $1 million just sitting there in the business. And again, he was structured correctly. He had the right structure. But the problem is, as this was categorized as a retained earnings, it was his cash, already paid tax on it. It was in the business. The problem is that's very low-hanging fruit in a litigation situation.
Yeah.
And so we advised him to move the money, make sure that it is housed in a joint account with him and his wife. That makes it community property, that makes it such that you can't have that on the table when it comes to litigation, and it's a little easier to defend and protect. And so at the end of the day, not only is it critical to have the right structure, but it's critical to know how to use that structure to maximize that ultimate goal of success, which is money in your pocket. Money in the business doesn't necessarily mean money in your pocket.
Yes. Well, that's a really, really good point, because we're talking a lot about protections and liability protections. And that's a scenario you brought up there where, you might, at the surface level, you wouldn't think, oh, what if we do this and this happens? That's kind of like an, obscure scenario. But if and when it comes up, boy, you better have some ready available resources to advise you on how to make those moves. And I think that's super important. So let's talk a little bit about more of the structures. So when would a business owner, entrepreneur be in one structure and need to consider another one? What are some of those factors that would go into that?
I really think it starts early. I was on the phone just the other day with a client who went from making $90,000 to $140,000 in terms of what he was taking home. And that's definitely on the smaller end for what we advise. But again, I'd love to help everybody. And at the end of the day, he was ready for moving from a sole proprietor to an S corporation. And I told him once he crosses the $250,000 of income level, now we need to introduce a secondary C corporation to be able to help him as well, because then we're going to be able to take advantage of tax-free fringe benefits out of that C corporation as well. So with your graduation from that, kind of $100,000 to $250,000 and then $250,000 and beyond, now we're talking about we're creating structures around your business enterprise. So I like to have a structure that's built and designed for working in your business, where you produce a widget or a service, or that's where your core is. And then I like to create a company that is going to work on your business, or its purpose is going to be business development, marketing, advertising, research, that type of thing. And so you're starting to adapt some of the structure types that large corporations have across the country. And so, then you get into a portion where, hey, we've got the building like we talked about earlier, or we have another enterprise that we want to start. And how does that relate? And so one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is how you connect these companies before taxes paid. You do a corp-to-corp transfer and you connect them with contracts. And that's where our contract attorneys come into play. Again, another big service that we have in our company, where we're creating kind of this harmony amongst all of your entities.
That when you were describing that, there's extremely clear. And I like to say that I am not an engineer person. I'm more of a creative marketing mind. But I always resonate with process flow. And if you need me to do something, just tell me the steps. I can check them off and I can do it. And, it made me think of, if this, then that, if you made more than this, then you must look at that. And it's almost like like those little flow charts where it goes, did you make over this? Yes. If yes, then go down this path. If no, then okay, you're good. And that's really an interesting way to think about things, because, with structure, you need to know ultimately where you want to end, which is the optimal structure for your business to save taxes, increase cash flow. Well, if that's the case, it's going to be different for every single person, because the scenario you just described, making 90 going to 140, is way different than a couple 3 dentists that own a building or not. And it's the same concept, properly structuring business structures, but totally different scenarios.
It really is. And it's the dynamics. And sometimes people feel, I just want to kind of come back to this, keeping money in the business is, when you keep money in a business, you kind of feel wealthy, right? You say, hey, well, I've got money to pay payroll, I've got money to take care of operations, that type of thing. But the problem is that money is susceptible to being, number one, spent without you knowing it, or just, getting absorbed in operations. Structurally, you're keeping it under that hood. What I always encourage people to do is flush that money to the personal side. So use the tax code to get that money to you personally. And you can always make what's called a shareholder loan back to the corporation if it ever needs resource. So just like your personal credit stands behind your S corporation company, so does your checkbook. And so I'd rather you have more cash on the personal side working for you, doing what you needed to do. That's the purpose of having money. And then if you needed to undergird the business, you could always do that. That's what it means to be a business owner.
And aren't there also certain types of accounts where you could put that liquid cash either on the personal side or the business side where it's still liquid and accessible, but it's protected as well? I'm thinking in the case of the lawsuit and whatnot, or even on just, readily accessible cash. Aren't there certain accounts where it's not just a savings account or an investment account where someone could see that and go, oh, well, we can hit that with a lawsuit? But I would think that there's some good types of accounts where there's still protection while growth is happening.
There really are. I like to say money needs to have a home. Yeah. And when you start thinking about where your money lives and what is it doing for you, there are a lot of bad homes for money. Under the mattress would be the number one bad place for the money, right? But you could always.
I bet you it still happens.
It really does. You could park it in a checking account. The bank's going to love you. They're going to treat you like you're their premier member, but they're really giving you, really pebbles as far as interest there. So what I like to do, I break my business up into two major categories. Taxes today, where we focus on structure, we focus on saving you money in taxes, on income, and what's flowing through to you. But then taxes tomorrow, where you're actually kind of doing this block and tackle type of approach, where you're protecting your money from taxes, from anything future tax-wise, from any fees. We work through a fee structure, and then we also protect it from volatility or losses. And by eliminating those three things, we create what's called the Rich Man Roth, which is a fantastic vehicle. I call it an anchor investment, where I encourage people to say, hey, you can still be liquid. You can still, have that cash available for the business inside the Rich Man Roth, but now it's earning for you, 7, 8, 9, 10%, and you're still liquid and you can still do what you need to do, and there's no risk of loss. I mean, if you could have a savings account like that, most people would raise their hand right away. I want that.
Yep. Well, I want to dive in a little bit deeper on that in a minute, but I want to tag this last thought here because you were mentioning taxes, fees, liability, protection. And I think, most people want to run away from things that would hurt them or make them fearful, more so than, going towards something that might be nice. They're going to be like, no, I want to protect, what I've got. So talk a little bit about the liability or the protection side of things, or is there a way to protect them all at the same time?
Yeah, so number one, the first layer or first line of defense, if you will, is the right structure. And back to, having those corporate veils, knowing the proper flow of money. And again, that's why we call ourselves business coaches, because we're coaching people through, something as simple as, hey, I'm leasing my vehicle versus buying my vehicle, or the business is doing this, and not knowing how to do that properly can pierce the corporate veil. And so we want to protect, and we want to use that corporate veil, number one, again, proper structure. But then two, this Rich Man Roth structure that we're talking about is inherently litigation proof. And so because it is built on a life insurance chassis, and that's that kind of that we're in an uphill battle with a lot of people with life insurance because it's got a bad rap because, most people have term life insurance, 98% of term never pays out. They maybe have had that experience. And so they don't like life insurance. But the truth is the tax code speaks so much more to what life insurance can do. And one of those things is, hey, it's tied to your life, so it's not even on the table. You could get divorced, Mike. I mean, heaven forbid. And even in that scenario, the money in the Rich Man Roth and the life insurance vehicle that we design is not on the table.
Wow. That's huge. So that's protection from a new angle that, like if you're looking at bullet points of, hey, I want to protect my wealth from taxes. Okay. Liability. And also other people. And other people could be a divorce settlement. It could be, maybe someone suing you. So it could be a lot of things. For that matter, it could be an athlete or an actor that has an influx of cash. Maybe you can park it in this kind of a vehicle, and then you can honestly say, look, I don't have access to, this is all tied up and spoken for. So I think there's a lot of things there when we're talking about kind of wrapping that bubble or that moat around your wealth with protection, liability, and being able to reduce your taxes.
100%. Yeah, there's so much available there in those two lines of defense, if you will.
So let's shift now into that, kind of using that thought in mind. It almost feels like you're now creating these vehicles and you're operating like you're your own bank, in the sense that you've got nice places to put money for growth, also for protection, and then there's ways to reaccess it, right? So talk a little bit about tax-free income and maybe operating like your own bank.
Yeah, there's a lot of terms out there that people throw around and, try to capture. I called mine the rich man Roth because I think that best describes what this is. People are familiar with a Roth vehicle where you put money in after tax and then you never pay tax on it again. Well, again, I like to say this rich man Roth it's kind of a Swiss Army knife of investment vehicles, and it really covers a lot of different things. I love to say money needs to have a home, number one, but number two, money needs to multitask. And so in this situation, you're putting money into the rich man Roth. You call it your own bank, capital warehousing. People have, infinite banking. There's all these terms that are out there. What we have done is we have significantly refined the way that it operates. And what we're doing is, normally when you go out and you say, hey, I want life insurance, you're saying, Mr. Life Insurance Salesman, here's $1. I want the most amount of life insurance you can give me for this $1. And we're turning that on its head, and we're saying, Mr. Life Insurance Man, here's $1. I want the least amount of life insurance for this. Because what we're doing is we're using the life insurance to classify that $1 now in the tax-free world. We're opening the window to the tax-free world. So basically, we open up this bank, we open up this life insurance vehicle. I like to use the indexed universal life. It has a lot of good benefits to it. It's not something that, hey, we've got just one product and one carrier that does this, but we have a team that's very, very careful in what they do and can design it in such a way that you're going to be able to maximize the return. Like I said, because of Code Section 7702, there's no taxes. So you put the money into this, it grows. Let's say it quadruples. You will pay no tax on that money. And there is a system by which it's called a zero net loan, where you can take money out of that vehicle and you'll never pay tax on it. And we create actually income streams, almost like a pension, that are just radical for some of our clients.
So I love word pictures and stories, and I liked how you described the $1 and give me the most life insurance coverage versus like a whole life policy where you say, here's $1, give me the least amount, and people would scratch their head and say, why would I want the least amount? Well, in my opinion, for hearing what you described, is this accurate? I want the least amount of insurance coverage because I want to put the most amount of ongoing cash into this policy so that it does what you just said, which is grow tax-free, and I can access it, with these disbursements, and it allows you then to have more value on the front side before death. So it doesn't matter what your death benefit is, because if death happens, you're going to transfer that to your heirs, and they're going to have more benefit than if you had the most amount for that $1 for the term side.
Exactly. It's kind of a self-completing 401k, if you will. Because you put the first payment into this thing and it's worth what it's worth from a death benefit standpoint during the years that you may be funding it. You still have access to your cash, but you've got this big death benefit. And it's funny because I tell that story about the $1, but the reality is I'm able to get people the life insurance that they were hoping for. The reason they even went out and got that whole life or that term life through this vehicle. Remember, it's multitasking money, and it's usually a lot more than they ever thought they could get. And I tell them, hey, if you don't want the life insurance, I'll tell you how to spell my name. That'll be fine. But everybody seems to want the life insurance. They want that in there. So it's a nice way to get those different benefits. I'd love to tell a quick story of one of my clients. He was a dentist, and he was doing quite well. He was making about $800,000 a year, and he was paying a significant amount in taxes. And we came alongside him. We saved him about $140,000 a year in taxes through our Taxes Today strategies, structuring them correctly, doing what he needed to do. And he was already putting away $60,000 into a 401k or defined benefit plan. And I said, if you really believe taxes are going to be higher in the future, then stop doing that. Because what you're doing is you're saying to the government, I don't want to pay tax on it now. Mm-hmm. I'll just hold on that and I'll pay tax on it later. And at the end of the day, we don't know what that tax rate's going to be, right? The government is spending money so quickly, we can't even keep up with what the debt is, right? It's over $29 trillion and rising. And so at the end of the day, what we need to do is we need to protect it, pay the tax now, and never pay tax on it again. So we took the $60,000 that he was saving. We took the $140,000 that we saved him, found money. And so now you have $200,000. He was 47 when we started this. And we went for 10 years, 47 years old. We went for 10 years at $200,000. So $2 million in, most of it Uncle Sam's money. At the end of the 10 years, he's 57 years old. He wanted to stop working at 60. So he goes ahead and he saves the $200 a year, just uses the two cash, just for whatever he wants for 3 years. And then at age 60, he retires. We teach him how to sell his business tax favored. And so he gets a tax-free income from the sale of his business through our structures for 10 years. So from 60 to 70, he's living off of that sale. And then at 70, we were able to create for him $475,000 a year tax-free of income for the rest of his life. And so we radically changed his picture. So we were able to take this guy and, we gave him roughly $19 million when at the end of the day, taxable, that has to be almost $30 million. So radical numbers, changing the paradigm.
And doing what he was already doing. In other words, using the money he was already making. So just allocating it a different way.
Didn't change his lifestyle. Yeah. Matter of fact, he was just so happy, he told all his friends about it.
He didn't have to buy 4 more businesses. He didn't have to expand to get those numbers. It was, plodding along, doing what he's been doing, but just setting things up and doing things differently. And I guess that, to me, is the true definition of a rich man Roth, because without getting into details of limits and all that, we all know that a Roth IRA has limits of what you can put in and how much you can make to have a Roth. So it caps out at some point. But doing these things you're talking about just opens Pandora's box of opportunity.
It really does. And there are some restrictions within the rich man Roth, but they're much, much higher and they're softer than some of the hard and fast, number rules that you have with the IRS. And so we're really talking about, hey, how much of net worth do you have or how much of income do you have? And so it all fits very, very nicely. I've not even run into a situation where somebody has said, I can't put as much as I want to into this. And so we're able to really maximize those dollars for the clients.
So, when we hear those things, it makes me think, my money is working smart, not hard. In fact, me personally, if I was that dentist, I'm not lifting a extra finger doing anything more than I was doing, and I'm seeing these returns and these things happening. So talk a little bit about having money work smarter, not harder, and then how does that correlate to like rates of return? Because I think a lot of times people would hear, oh, let me talk to my financial person, and they said they can, average rate of return is X, but it's sometimes rate of return is not the right number to look at. It's like, what's the net return based on fees and taxes and things like that, right?
Right. So the easiest part of the rich man Roth is the taxes, because we know just because of the code that it is going to be tax-free. So all the income, what money's left over for your family, all of that tax-free. So that already is smarter than your IRA or your 401k or your mutual fund or whatever it is. Because if one of those accounts makes $1 million, you know that you're really going to get about $750,000, right? So you don't have the true return in one of those taxable accounts. Whereas now in the rich man Roth, you make $1 million, that's all yours, right? And so that's the first smarter versus harder. The second thing is we use what's called an index, and a lot of people aren't familiar with indexes. It basically says that we're going to use a system within options that protects your money from ever going below zero. So you can never lose money in the market. And so what that means is it's kind of like a ratchet, right? Everybody's used a ratchet at some point where you stick that ratchet on something, a socket, and you can only crank it with torque in one direction. You push it the other way and you get this funny windy sound, right? Yeah. And so at the end of the day, you're not going to get any losses inside this vehicle. It's only going to be the upside. So you only have the gains. And so there might be a year where the market's underwater. I think back to 2007, 2008, where everybody was kind of hurting. And actually, we're coming into a time like that now, too, where, you may not get a return on the Rich Man Roth because it's at flat. It's not going to earn anything. But the beauty of it is it's not going to lose anything. Exactly. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that's a point that I want to kind of park on for a second, because people don't really think about this when they hear about, all these benefits, when there's a floor to your losses, when you cannot lose money. That's an unbelievable comfort feeling of protection. So there's upside, but there's zero downside, and you can't lose money. How about all the stories we hear about people that go, oh, my finance person lost all my money. The market dropped. The market crashed. Well, the next time you hear about market crash, you can just kind of yawn and log off the computer because it doesn't affect you.
Right. Well, actually, I'll go you one more on that, Mike. It does affect you in the sense that when everybody else is losing their shirt, you're sitting there waiting because the rest of the market, it's going to try to recover. It's kind of the reverse of Newton's law, right? When Newton says what goes up must come down. Well, in this situation, what goes down must come up. That's kind of the rule of the stock market, because as you think about everybody else trying to recover, all the energy that they're putting into recovering back to where you are, that level of zero, is going to be gain for you. So it's, you're that much further ahead than they are because you've got more money and you're going to earn all the interest of those gains. And so we actually kind of like volatility. We like the needle popping up and down because it helps our account because we only go upward. Because
without getting into detailed numbers, if someone in their traditional portfolio lost 10%, you might need to gain 12, 14% to get back to the 10 that you had.
Exactly.
So if you're not losing it in the first place, then it becomes a powerful position. Exactly right. It's that's the beauty of when I say working, smarter, not harder, because you're just sitting there waiting, and it just really starts to compound. And so, I'd rather be in a situation where you don't have to work for these really, really high numbers of return, because that's not realistic, right? We all know that if you want 30% return on something, you're probably going to have to take a risk. Everybody knows that. But inside of this particular vehicle, we're averaging, like I said, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10%. You're not having to take risk. You're getting that return, but we wiped out the taxes. That's a big chunk. We wiped out the losses. That's a big chunk. And then we actually wipe out the fees as well. That's another big chunk. And so at the end of the day, this ends up being a very, very powerful vehicle. Well, the other big chunk that is not quantifiable, but is a major factor, peace of mind. Isn't it true that you hear, the stock market crash and people are, going nuts, or their stomach turns, or they're charting everything, minute by minute. But if you've removed this and removed that and removed this, isn't it kind of like blue skies kind of a feeling that your clients are like, I no longer worry about these drops because of what we're doing here?
Yeah. And, the reality of the world of the entrepreneur, of the business owner, is we take plenty of risk every day. I like to say we wake up unemployed every morning, right? Because we work for ourselves. And at the end of the day, the last thing I need is another category to worry about. And so having a peace of mind, knowing that my money is safe, that it's not going to fall out from underneath me, that it is that safe bank account, that Rich Man Roth that we're talking about, that really changes how I can face the rest of my life and the risk tolerance that I have in my business. And having that anchor investment of the RMR means that you can potentially go out and take a risk with somewhat of what I call fun money, and maybe do hit it big on something, whether it's a speculation or a private equity or something like that. And that really resonates with a lot of the clients and business owners that I have.
I spent about 10 years in the mortgage industry about 15 years ago, and I remember people that would have a house paid in full and free and clear, no mortgage, and they would feel so, relieved, and that's a feeling of relief. But I was advising them, you have an opportunity to, actually it's a problem because you have all that equity locked up. So you need to set up a line of credit, a home equity line of credit, so that if you, at any moment you needed 20,000, 50,000, whatever, you just go down to the bank and they hand it to you, or write a check, they hand it to you, or transfer out of your online account. So having that equity in that, house is not working for you. So it makes me think of what we're talking about here. So if you are now repositioning where you're putting money instead of some of these qualified accounts that we're talking about, but we're putting it into this vehicle, and one day you go, wow, I wish I hadn't put in all of that money in there because now I need X. How accessible is it? How liquid is it? Can you re-access that, or what does that look like? Because I think that would be a concern for people to go, oof, I was really aggressive in putting it in, but now I need a quick 40,000 for some project. How do you do that?
And that's where this really becomes a beautiful vehicle, because you can simply, with a phone call, basically say, hey, I need X amount of dollars out of my account, and they'll wire it to your checking account. Now, again, that's going to be in the form of a loan against not the death benefit, but against the cash that's inside this vehicle. And it gets a little complicated, but it's the only vehicle on the planet that you can take money out of. Let's say you wanted to go flip a house, or you wanted to invest in an opportunity, or whatever it is, and you had $100,000 in the RMR, and you took $30,000 out. You could take that 30, and you would think now, hey, I only have 70,000 working for me in the RMR. That's not true. You actually have the full 100 still working for you in the RMR, and you're double dipping. You're earning interest off the 100,000 in the RMR, but then you're turning around and you're taking your 30 and you're going to flip a house. And so for people who know how to use their money, they can really maximize this thing. And, bankers really get this. I have a few clients that are bankers. One guy actually owns a main street in a small town, America. And he turns around and he looks at me, he's like, how do I get more of this? Because he understands arbitrage, he understands all those concepts, but at the end of the day, you can access your money very easily, be able to get that money in your pocket. I use this in spades for car dealers. Car dealers, they need to keep at least $1 million in cash ready to go buy inventory. And normally that just sits in a checking account at the bank, and I show them, hey, we can earn you, 9% on this thing, and it's protected, and all the other things we've talked about. I mean, they're lining up to get that done.
And I think that's a spectacular point that we're bringing up: liquidity, access to that, and you're pulling it out to use for some other safe, calculated reason. But then the rate of return is building up on the original amount, not the amount that you're pulling out. It's not being reduced. So you're saying the word loan, so you're making payments back to the vehicle, back to yourself. And am I correct in thinking too that the payment and the interest that's being charged on this loan payment, all of that is just going right back into your account? So it's like taking money out of your left-hand pocket and putting it in your right-hand pocket.
Right. I like to say, if you were the banker, how much interest would you charge yourself? And because that's what's happening, is you're paying yourself, right?
Yeah.
And
charge me 20%.
Zero net. Right. We call it a zero net loan because it really nets out to zero because it's all yours.
And I want to reiterate the point that maybe we've even touched on before, but you mentioned bankers get it and things like that. This is not a new concept. This is something that's been around for over 100 years, and actually banks themselves take our deposits that we put in and they pay us whatever paltry amount that's in our savings account return, but they take those monies and put them in these kinds of vehicles as well. So this is a proven, product, and it's not something that's new.
It's not. If you pop the hood on the economic machine that is our economy, that is the United States economy, insurance, whether it's BOLI, which is called bank-owned life insurance, or COLI, which is corporate-owned life insurance, those things play such a huge role in maintaining the economy, keeping it going, earning this safe interest. These are big factors, and they really came into play after the Great Depression because, or during that time, they were really strong because what ended up happening is every other institution was failing. The insurance companies bailed everybody out. If you talk to a farmer who was around during the Great Depression, he's going to tell you, hey, the insurance company bailed me out. They talk to a banker, he's going to tell you the insurance company bailed them out, because at the end of the day, there are laws that protect around this particular world of finance.
So let's even kind of wrap up this thought process with just another example or two of that arbitrage concept, where you've got this funded the right way and you want to access it to do something else productive. You mentioned like flip a home. What are some other ways that you're seeing your clients need access to this liquidity in the account, and what are they doing with it? And then let's just say that house flip or that project, whatever that might look like, when that pans out and it now, do you then replace that whole amount plus some? What does that look like in that example?
So I like to say that there's no penalties, but there are consequences, right? So if you take money out of the account and you're using it for flipping a house, or say you're paying for your daughter's wedding, or say you're helping to pay for college, I mean, those are not investments that have a tangible dollar amount return. They have other returns, but basically you have to calculate if you don't put the money back and you don't necessarily, pay back the loan, if you were, what's going to happen is the cash value in the account is going to be lower in the future. Now, that may not be a problem, because you may be borrowing out of it less than it's earning, right? So now you're talking about a different kind of arbitrage. If this thing's earning $100,000 a year and you take out 30, you really didn't hurt it that much. And so there are different things. And again, that's how we advise. We come in, we look at what the need is, and we try to advise people. This is a liquid account, but oftentimes when people see how it's doing, unless they're doing an investment structure, they may not pull it. And we've saved them so much money in other areas, they don't need it, And so at the end of the day, they have opportunity. It's there for those life events. I encourage people to celebrate life, take that vacation to Hawaii, do what you need to do, enjoy the fruit of your labor, and your money's multitasking for you while you do that.
And if you do pull it out for a project that, like in the case of a flip, where it's pretty short term, so a period of months or whatnot, and you close that transaction and have a profit of X, can you then put that money back into the vehicle so that now there's not the withdrawal?
Exactly. There's no, then you basically erase the consequence, right? Like I said, there's consequences, no penalties. So you can reverse or erase the consequence of that deduction by simply putting the money back. And so you retain the integrity of the long-term play. If you do
the long-term death benefit, the cash value is continuing to grow and all of that. So you popped it out for a minute to do your project. And then, like in your case, or like the example you mentioned about some of the other things, life events, weddings, or college tuition, it's not like that's going to provide a return, but you needed to access that cash anyway. And if you had left that cash in a savings account, you're earning 0.00 whatever percent. So you may as well have it in this vehicle for a while you're saving for that. And then when you need it, you pull it out and use it because you were going to do that anyway.
Yeah. Little tidbit, you mentioned college. We talked about college. If this is one of your major assets, and we do this for a lot of clients, if this is one of your major assets, the colleges don't see this, even FICA doesn't see this as an asset. And so therefore you may qualify for more scholarships. And, there are billions of dollars left on the table for scholarships in college. And this is one of the strategies that is out there, is to put your money into one of these vehicles that protects it from that. And at the end of the day, your child may qualify for more.
That is very interesting, because I think that, a lot of people think, oh, college, here's the tuition bill, let me pull it out of some account, pay it. But in your example there, one of the factors that goes into the FAFSA and qualifying for grants or scholarships, things like that, might be what the full picture looks like, which includes the parents' financial. Well, if the parents can park some funds over in a vehicle like this and make the situation look better to the school or the grant or the scholarship, all of a sudden now that becomes more opportunity and benefit. And, it's almost like a quote unquote return, but it's not based on the vehicle or the investment. It's just because you shifted some money around and got a better return, which then led to handling that for college. That's really an interesting strategy.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. It's a powerful vehicle. We find that whether you're, I've built this for 12-year-olds for the long-term investment that maybe grandpa wants to give them some money, that type of thing. And I've built it for, 80-year-olds who are trying to leave a strong legacy. And they're everything in between. There's all kinds of opportunities, whether it's just your run-of-the-mill, hey, I'm trying to pay for college, or whether it's, hey, I'm trying to, amass an empire in terms of building real estate or whatever it might be. The RMR becomes still that anchor investment to help with all of those dreams.
Well, Josh, it's been a real pleasure talking with you today. These are some powerful concepts, and if someone is interested in connecting with you to learn about that anchor investment and what the Rich Man Roth could potentially do for their personal and business life, what's the best way they can reach out and connect with you?
Yeah, I always invite people to go on to stratnavinc.com. That's our website. There's a contact us form. They can simply do that. We have a complimentary analysis and consultation. Love to talk with people. Love to help people. That's why I'm in the business, and would love to help anyone who's interested.
Excellent. Well, Josh, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.